Okay, Christina here to listen to some music. And today's music selection is XANADU by Rush. This will be my first official listen to this band, as far as I know. I've sort of heard of this band before, but I've always gotten it confused with other songs or bands. Like there have been songs named Rush, but just the names have always just sort of been floating around in my consciousness. I'm very excited to finally get to narrow this down and get to know this band. This has been recommended a lot in my journey with progressive rock on the channel, so I am assuming that this band is also progressive rock. And again, I would not have known that before this little adventure here. So for that, I'm very grateful. So I have learned that Rush started in 1968 and that this song Xanadu was released in 1977. But that's about all I know. And I'm really interested to hear this because I know Xanadu is sort of like a really pretty place, sort of perfect and beautiful. And so I can imagine all the different sounds in prog rock here that might be able to transcribe that into music. But before we get into this, don't forget to do all the things like and subscribe. Find me over on Patreon. You can support the channel on Ko-fi, do direct requests, become a channel member here on YouTube. Things have been going really well with the channel. It's been a lot of fun so far, and glad to have all of you with me on this journey. Also, you don't have to do any of those things. If you're able, just leave a comment on the video. I do try to read all the comments as best I can. But for now, enough talking. Let's listen. All right, here we go. Okay, we finally got into the thick of it. That was really fun. Wow. So, first, I want to address the fact that I am reacting to a live version of this song. And I believe it was recorded at a concert in 1981. So there's a little bit of conversation, discussion happening in the comments about should I do live versions first or studio versions of a song. And all I can say is I'm going to do a mix of both. If there's a studio version that I should go back later and do the live later, I will, and vice versa. So if this live version here, if it really is advantageous for me to go back and do the studio version, I will. But for now, I am going to enjoy what these musicians are doing. And so far, it has been pretty fabulous. This whole thing is like over 12 minutes long here, so I don't know if that's the actual length of the actual studio version of the song, but this intro was still really fun, and I can imagine what the studio version would be if it was a little bit shortened. But seeing what they were doing was really, really fun. Just sitting on that pedal tone the whole time, watching the percussion setup at work, just completely surrounded in that little world of percussion instruments. And I saw just about everything you could see. Chimes and bells and triangles and all the drums and just everything. And I mean, I was very impressed. I would have gotten dizzy. Like he was just going around and around in circles, just hitting everything. It was great. And then there was somebody, was it the same guy now? I can't remember. No, I don't know. But there was someone, I think with keyboards, and they had a little dial, some kind of electric contraption going, you know. I love all those little sounds. That's perhaps why I'm drawn to really like progressive rock, is I do like all of those little sounds, the bells and whistles, electronic or not. Then we have the guitar with the 2 fingerboards. Awesome, first of all. And I really enjoyed the solo. It was slow and steady. It involved a nice harmonic progression. And speaking of harmonics, there were some harmonics done in there too, which is where you just barely touch the string with the left hand, the left fingers, and it rings an extra amount. And I could see that he did that, especially towards the end of that little solo. The suspension was almost uncomfortable. I was like, when is this going to get going? But then it finally did. And the beat was quite fast. I wasn't expecting it to be quite that fast, but hey, I'm here for it. So I'm going to back it up a little bit and hear just the end of that transition, and we're going to keep going. Okay, we're headed into a whole new section because there have been so many new sections all along. Wow. This is like a grand buffet of musical concepts. Oh, and I'm hungry. Let's eat. Oh, this is so great. All the different time changes, and within the little sections of this faster section, a slower section, the vocal section, the bass and guitar duet section. Within those sections, there is variation within the time signatures and the beats. I've heard pretty much everything I can name. I've heard both duple and simple time signatures. I heard like a 7/8 at one point. I held up my fingers to say 7. There's a 7/8 of 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. And then I've heard some sort of triplet da 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 da, bigger beats and then bump 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 bump, the tighter tempos there. And then just watching the mastery of these musicians. So again, that duet, I did this because the bass and lead guitar, first of all, these guys with the double fingerboards, I don't know, what do you call them? The double guitars. I love that. Actually saw a comment recently, someone asking if I've ever seen a violin that has 2 fingerboards, and I don't think I have. That would be really cool. I'm not quite sure how they'd be played. They would have to they couldn't be flat. They'd have to sort of be like that so that you can do the bows, but it could be possible. If I was a luthier, a violin maker, maybe I would try to do that. I don't know. Build one myself. Where's Stradivari when we need him? Anyway, very, very cool. These guys with their double guitar, double bass, and then joyfully playing them. The big smiles on their faces. I was trying to point that out too. They were just so happy. Having a good time and just playing to each other, and it was just this fun little dance. I loved it. There's nothing better than seeing musicians on stage really enjoying playing the music. Like, you can tell when musicians are kind of done. They're kind of bored, like they've played this song hundreds of times, and that's not where these guys are with this music. And I don't know how many times they've played this song. I mean, it's really, really well put together, so I'm assuming a lot, but the joy in what they're doing is just very, very present. And then I have to comment on the drummer. I mean, hello. Well, first of all, you can tell he's just so precise. But did you see that little move when he threw the drumstick up? And I know that maybe that's almost cliche, but maybe he was one of the first to do it. I don't know. But when I saw it, I was like, wow. I was thoroughly impressed. Imagine a string player doing that on stage, flipping the bow up and then catch it. Yeah, no. And then we have the vocals. So it's interesting because I've heard some of these progressive rock bands now, and a lot of them tend to have vocalists with a higher register of voice. But again, there's something about that register that really stands out over the music. Like, you're able to have more depth in the lower notes in the music, and then the higher voice really cuts through. And then what he was talking about, so I was right, Xanadu, it's paradise, basically. And so all of these little different sections, it's almost like trying to describe a person walking through a land of paradise, maybe that no one has seen before. It's all the different terrains that they would experience, that they would walk through. I can just imagine all the different experiences walking through this paradise. Why does the paradise exist? What does it represent? How are they getting there? That I don't know yet. And maybe we won't know. You don't have to know, but it's still fun just to see what they're trying to describe through music. Okay, so we just headed into a new section with keyboards. So I'm going to back it up and start that again and see where we go from here. Okay, so now I'm really starting to get a grasp on the form of all of this. And again, I don't know if this is the form of the studio version. If it is, I will be so impressed. Okay, wow. The bassist is the lead vocals and the keyboard. It took me a hot second to realize that. When I realized that the vocalist was singing at the keyboard, and I was like, wait a minute, I thought it was the bassist that was singing before. It's like, wow, they have two singers that really sound alike. And then I realized, no, that's the same guy unless they're identical twins. That's the same guy. And then I saw the bass, like hanging in front of him. Oh my goodness. He's got just as much around him as the percussionist. So that was impressive. So they're really playing upon these duets. So, there's the guitar and the bass duet, which, hello, having so much fun there. Like standing with their, back to back. But then the keyboard and the percussionist on the xylophone in unison. And then, and again, it took me a second. There's just so much going on. It took me a second to realize the vocalist is playing along with himself in unison on the bass. And so what I was saying before really was true. And I guess this is why my ear was really leaning on that, is his higher register voice and then the foundation of the instruments. He's literally playing his vocal line way down there on the bass. Normally it would be the guitar. That was really creative and impressive. I like the main chorus when they sing the XANADU, I like how everything just kind of stops, just saying XANADU. It's almost like a moment of being appreciative of the beauty around them. Okay, and so back to, again, with the duet with the guitar and the bassist and how they were standing there back to back. I started to really smile there for a moment because all I could think of, especially the way you've got sort of the blondish guy and the brunette guy with sort of the longer mop top kind of hair. All I could think of was Bill and Ted, or maybe Wayne and Garth, but Bill and Ted was the original Wayne and Garth. So I'm going to go with Bill and Ted. That was fun for me to see. And of course, I know all of this predates all of that. I mean, where do you think they got their influences from, right? But for me, that was just fun. A nod back to my childhood. Well, once again, I'm going to back up just a tiny bit, and then we're going to hear the end of this masterpiece. It is a masterpiece. right. That was a lot of fun. Yeah. How can 3 people make that much sound on a stage and have so much variation in it and have them all be together so perfectly? Well, I know what it takes to put together a really well-polished musical presentation, and they absolutely did that. So towards the end there, we had the restatement of XANADU. And again, that goes into the form of the piece, the intro and then the variations, like walking through all the different terrains. And then we have the XANADU statement. And then we went into the keyboard section and then some more terrain. And then we had the XANADU statement again. And then the last few minutes were sort of recapitulations, like recaps of all of the previous material, but layered at different times and in different ways. So to me, it was very interesting from beginning to end. And we kind of wound up where we started, sort of with that intro material. But there was that really neat guitar solo moment. Wow. I can't help but think of David Gilmour, Pink Floyd. There was some really good wailing happening there. It was really beautiful. And then we got to the noodly stuff, lots of and it had a lot of direction to it. It wasn't just random messy notes. I really, really appreciated what he was doing. And then, of course, when all of that stuff came back after that last XANADU statement, there were some differences. So I didn't hear the vocalist in unison with the bass line that second time through. I did hear more of the keyboard with the xylophone, but I didn't hear, he was playing a different bass line under his vocals, which is, I think, the way he did it the first time, and the second time it was unison, and then the time it returned, it was different again. But wow, I loved the part with that guitar solo and the lower notes. That was also a little bit Pink Floyd, and I don't mean to necessarily reference all of the contemporary bands of the time, but there was some influence there. This is where the technology was for the instruments. They were all sort of experimenting with it, and so there are going to be some similarities there, and there's nothing wrong with that. I happen to really like Pink Floyd, so hearing that here was very enjoyable for me. Okay, so one other thing I have to bring up, and again, this has to do with influences, but again, it's totally fine, is that I thought it sounded a little bit like disco. Just kidding. If you know, you know. No, I don't think it sounded like disco. Instead, I kept hearing a guitar line in there that really reminded me of a Guns N' Roses song that I know really well because I've played it in a string quartet, Sweet Child of Mine. So I just wanted to go back and see if I can find that little motif that sounded like that. It really does remind me of the main guitar theme for Sweet Child of Mine. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. I believe this came first. Okay, I wanted to go back and hear that big bass moment that was, for me, I love that sound, the kind of sound that rumbles the stage. Okay, yeah, so those lower sounds are really, really awesome. And the slide up to them, ooh, really, really exciting. And then with the awesome guitar solo on top. Let's see if I can go back and find some of the unison that I was talking about. So you hear the keyboard and the percussion at the same time. Nice. Okay, and so this is where the voice and the bass And I like how the statement is XANADU. Sorry, that was too low. XANADU. That's his vocal range up there. I love it. But wow, he really goes up there to some of those notes. All right, that was Rush. XANADU. I keep saying the word masterpiece, and I'm going to stick with that because this was a really complex piece of music, and I've heard a lot of complex music on the channel so far. This is definitely one of them, but I'm so impressed with how tight the performance was. I am also really curious to hear the studio version of this song. This is just really opening up my mind to the entire progressive rock universe. And I think it's funny how XANADU is sort of talking about its whole own little world, and it's becoming part of my prog universe, so that's kind of fun. But this was just a complete joy to experience, and I can't wait to experience more from this band. So go ahead, put in the comments other songs by this band, or if you really do think I should, if it's worth it for me to go listen to the studio version. I'm guessing it is, but I can't wait to hear what else this band can do. My interest is definitely piqued. All right, don't forget to do all the things, like I said, like and subscribe, Patreon, become a channel member. You can find me on Ko-fi, make direct requests, support the channel. And as always, just remember that you don't have to be perfect, just be okay. And keep listening.